on Viserai. This is the calling in Indianapolis, ladies and gentlemen. Round number 3. The players, as you see here, they're presenting both heroes, and that's basically how it goes. Then we determine who goes first, and the big reveal. But no surprises here, Brian. As the standard package here, you have the Arcanite Skullcap, Skeletor, the Grasp of the Arcanite, and I believe that is the Creepers for Matthew Dilks on the other end. A nice little mixture. This has been one of the very big points of debate. It has been Tunic, Vestige, Crown, Halo, Skullcap. There's a lot of versatility in these situations for the Prism in terms of what they're bringing, what they're wearing to the party.
Yeah, and they all have their place. You see, like, the Null Rune gloves finally having a chance to shine. Going to start things off on the Prism side with those auras. So important in these matchups.
And that's the bread and butter here for the Prism. It's auras all day. We're going to start with the Merciful Retribution, pass priority, and off to the races now as Matthew Dilks, not given really an opportunity to even filter the hand, which is a very adept play from going on that turn 0. Don't give your opponent a chance to go ahead and weed out the garbage, as it were, and fix your hand.
No, I mean, Travis could have gotten in for one there with the Merciful Retribution. That's an instant. Chose not to, and that's very purposeful.
All right, we're starting out. That is a Vexing Malice. It is having Go Again based on, I believe that's, the Go Again, that's coming in as a physical, and there's Arcane attached to that as well. But with the Null Rune gloves, you'll be able to just go ahead and absorb a lot of that damage. But we're going to start with the Vexing Malice, Go Again on that. And yeah, we're going to pitch, absorb some damage, drop the boots in there as well. And boots, of course, are always a threat to be blown up to a degree. But in this case, I think a very low-to-the-ground Vexing Malice, not very threatening in terms of losing the boots. But in terms of Viserai players, oftentimes you want to be going ahead, using that extra action point, clean out those auras.
Yep, able to grant Go Again to the Vexing Malice via Mauvrin Skies. Going to go ahead and get 2 attacks this turn. Rosetta Thorn looks like it's targeting that Merciful Retribution, keeping the auras off the battlefield. So critical, and also building up those rune chants. Just a lone rune chant thus far on the side of Dilks, but you know, that could change in a heartbeat. I expect we will not see an OTK plan here from Dilks. The presence of the Mauvrin Skies certainly points to the fact that we're going to be attacking here. We're going to be looking to go wide. It makes perfect sense when you're thinking about Prism Auras. This isn't the matchup for the one-turn kill strategy.
Absolutely not. And there you go. You're going to go start hunting auras. You need to start cleaning them out. And in terms of having the Spectra, you're basically closing the combat chain after that. You need action points. And action points are not necessarily the way that Viserai is going to be able to... you can't accumulate them as much as, let's say, a Dash player would, or rolling high on a Scab Skins and start cleaning things out. There's no time skippers here, so you need to be sure that at the end of the day, you're swinging that Rosetta and just going ahead and cleaning up all of those auras, because the more that they start spreading through, that's the name of the game here for the Prism player. The Prism player will be patient. The Prism player will take damage in order to preserve, you know, the establishment of a board of just this wide array of auras. And you see him pitching Genesis, and that is one of those massive pieces that can really change the game here from the perspective of the Prism player. But at this case here, we're going to pitch it for 2. You have the 1 extra float here that can rescue the action point should this Miraging Metamorph be blown up.
Yeah, not a ton of ways for Viserai to go ahead and activate Phantasm. As I say that, Amplify the Arcanite comes down, is going to do that trick. We do see the Phantasmal Footsteps saving the action. Going to just go ahead and close out the turn with a Shimmers of Silver, I believe. Try and amp up some of those next auras that'll go through for an attack.
And one of the tricky plays, and sometimes you can catch players with, is if you go in with a full grip and just drop the Miraging Metamorph, they pop it, and you sneak in at instant speed another very valuable aura. Double it up, because the popping effect, if that Miraging Metamorph is destroyed, it creates a copy of an existing aura. In this case, not possible, but here comes the onslaught again from Matthew Dilks on Viserai. And again, owing to... the versatility of Viserai. It's a very aggressive list. And you're not just coming with peanut butter, you're coming with jelly as well in this case. And that's a sandwich that Travis is going to have to eat here. Arcane and physical.
Yeah, and we see the plan from Dilks. Mauve Skies, get wide, get those extra attacks, work those rune chants. It's going to be a little nickel and diming, but ultimately explosive, I would say.
That's Travis's only sink below in the list, and that could potentially come through. Those 4 blocks are very valuable, especially if you're, coming after perhaps, one of those breakpoint cards, the 4s, the Swarming Gloomveil on 4, perhaps if there's a meet and greet at 4, that the on-hit effects that are quite important here. So just using that card while it's available, blocking out some damage. But here's another one. 3 on top. That is the Rune Chant damage. And Matthew Dilks has been really just laying it on thick here. And by keeping Travis's hand relatively slim, that is forcing, less impactful turns. Either you're just jamming a blue aura down for your action point and not swinging for face here. But as it stands, Travis 2-0 at the calling. He's put in a lot of work in this case, so he knows that patience is the name of the game.
I want to point out a super important interaction here. You see Dilks going to go ahead and close out the turn with Rosetta Thorn. However, that Rune Chant is still in the battlefield. It works that way. When you attack into an aura with a weapon specifically, you will not trigger the Rune Chants. So it's a way to go ahead and check those auras while still building up Rune Chants for your next turn and things like that. I mean, like I said, Dilks, I am willing to call him a master with this deck, even if he hasn't converted yet. The time is coming for Matthew Dilks. He knows this deck inside and out.
More aggression on the Prism side here as a Wartune Herald with the go again coming in for, I believe that's just 6. The yellow version comes in as 6 attack. Again, on hit, goes to Soul. And that's another important element for Prism here. Not necessarily just to be able to create Spectral Shields, which is a nice defensive tactic as well, but being able to have an outlet to pitch yellow, to activate the go against on all your attack, having that at your disposal is quite important. And that is a big piece here for the more aggression side of Prism. Herald of Erudition, frankly, is more likely, is in all honesty, the piece that you need to be concerned of if you're Matthew Dilks. But look at the sheer amount of absorption that, I don't know what a better word to say, that the equipment has here for Matthew Dilks. That's a lot of, block with 3, slide in the grass. Block with 3, slide in the Skeleton. There's a lot of opportunity here to just eat this.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, it's almost, there's so many things to appreciate about Rune Blades. The split damage is always first on everyone's list. But look at this equipment suite. Like, there's a good case for Spellbound Creepers as the best equipment in the entire game. I would happily make that many times. But also these block 2s, the Blood Chief Skeletta, the Grasp of the Arc Knight. Most decks don't have access to this many defensive tools, and you see Dilks leveraging Grasp there very effectively to make sure that Erudition does not trigger.
And what's beautiful about it is that it's not just that it's absorbing the damage and that the equipment pieces are there to eat 3 damage potentially for all, for most of them here, but they're also very key to the overall game plan of the. So you're not sacrificing anything here. It's just kind of extra gravy. You're like, all right, well, I want to be able to create Rune Chants, and screw it, I'll block for 3 too. Why not? And I've got the Skeletal as well to just go ahead, have a big Sonata turn, block some damage. It's all working in favor of Viserai here, as we've seen just why he is such an important point in that Triangle of Doom.
Yeah, and you see this Rune Flash gets to leverage that Rune Chant that was left over from the last turn because of that Rosetta Thorn interaction. Gets a little bit cheaper, means Dilks only has to pay 2 to go ahead and get in with that attack. Going to be able to leverage that go again and the one floating to go ahead and, again, get in with Rosetta Thorn should he need to.
And again, like you mentioned, it's very important. Clean out those auras while they're there, and you feel like that you're just throwing away damage. And on the side of Prism, though, there's that sort of situation where if you're coming in and if you're on Matt Dilks' side and you're seeing 3 auras, that could potentially be too many to handle. And then at that point, do you just forget about them entirely? Do you just continue to go face? Do you just continue to put pressure here? As right now, there's a 5-point discrepancy in terms of life total, but that can change in a heartbeat. Prism is not necessarily fearful of going down to single digits and have their opponent really high, because there will be that turning point in the game where you're jamming 2 auras at a turn, and that becomes way too much for your opponent to handle, wherein pitching just a yellow pitch means that all of that comes online and you're starting to attack and starting to attack and starting to attack. So this game is still, there's really, it's hard to tell who's who's in the lead here, but I would suspect that at this point Matthew must be feeling really good of the fact that it's been 3 or 4 turns already. He's been able to deposit 12 points of damage, and there's not a single aura on the board.
I think you're exactly right. I think that is what Dilks' early game is all about, just controlling those auras, preventing them from getting very wide. If I'm Dilks, I'm ecstatic about how these early turns have gone, and this is a pretty big spot as well. There's only 3 of those Herald of Eruditions in the deck. We've seen one be effectively blocked. Now it looks like one's going to have its Phantasm popped by Amplify the Arc Knight. So Dilks really finding a good home to go ahead and challenge those Phantasm effects. We are still going to continue the turn, of course, with some instants here. It looks like we're clearing out the soul a bit, making a Spectral Shield. But that's a pretty lame turn from Travis. Of no fault of his own, Dilks just had the correct answer.
Well, that's it, exactly. And it's amazing that he didn't even have to use another piece of equipment in this case, which is essentially your failsafe in terms of dealing with those major pieces. The Heralds themselves are quite powerful. The on-hit effects can be, they can be very detrimental in for Matt Dilks here, but at the same time, that's 2 of the major heavy hitters that are already off the board and not a worry anymore. So in this case, here comes the Swarming Gloomveil, and this is one of those big pieces in terms of Matthew Dilks' arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, huge add from Everfest is Swarming Gloomveil. Obviously very easy for Viserai to get really all of these benefits online should it want to, but almost always will be able to instill Go Again in this attack. I mean, kind of doubling up here. Mauve Sky is going to give it Go Again as well, but also the aura has been created through the Rune Chant, Viserai ability, making that. Going to give this attack Go Again and leaving Dilks more options for the rest of the turn. Let's see how Travis wants to go ahead and defend here.
Yeah, we're just a little bit of a nice little Herald of Triumph to go ahead and just soak up that damage. No problem. Again, life total will eventually matter, obviously. But, I mean, keeping a healthy total early means that late game you're feeling really good when all of those Rune Chants might become a little more hard to swallow. And this is the first swing of Rosetta Thorn to face. So this is going to be a 2+2+1. And this is what we're talking about, how Rosetta Thorn is just so powerful. 3 sources of damage, 2 types of damage. How do you deal with that? Yeah, you've got the gloves on.
You take the damage. That's how you deal. I mean, there's not too many options here, and it's just going to be a very effective tool in Dilks' arsenal.
So doing a little deck checking over here, cleaning up, seeing what else is left, and that's another skill that, a good habit and behavior that these top players do is just know what's coming, what's left, keep stock of what's left. You don't necessarily have your opponent's deck list, but you know more or less what those key pieces are. You've seen one Gloomveil. You've seen how many Mauvrian Skies, how many Mordred Tides, how many of these big pieces that you can just keep track of, so that when you do have to make those really clutch decisions, those very crucial points of the game where you have to decide, does he have it or doesn't he, those odds all kind of factor in.
I love that you mentioned Mordred Tide because we haven't seen one yet. And it's such a critical piece for Viserai to really have those super explosive go wide turns. And here's another point why I would say this game is trending in favor of Dilks. Look at these life totals. Without having used any of those big turns, all those resources are still available in the deck for Dilks. And again, just solid defense on the back of these Amplify the Arc Knights, just getting tremendous value out of them. It's hard for Viserai to do this and pop Phantasm. You wouldn't know it watching this game.
That's right. And in this case, he's done it. He's gone ahead and he's popped the Phantasm and said, all right, you can go ahead and recover that. You can recover that point if you want to, but it's going to cost you the card in hand to pitch for it, as that Tunic's only at 2. Had this been a turn later, that Tunic would have been able to recover those points, and maybe you pitch and play what's in your arsenal, continue some of that pressure. But going ahead and popping one of those Heralds of Protection is a decent move here. It's one card out of your hand to save all of that potential drama and the Spectral Shield that could have been devastating too. Again,
absolutely.
Matthew needs to just make sure that there is nothing staying on the board when his turn is over. Clear it out. Keep it just like an open field.
Doing an incredible job of that thus far. Going to go ahead and pitch Dread Tripdark here. One of my favorite Rune Blade cards, just because of like anytime you get that much value out of your blues in the late game, it feels so good.
It's like one of those super value combo meals.
Absolutely.
Did you do this? Did you do this? Well, you get all this. It's all good. It does everything. It has so many different layers of text on it that have immense impact on the game. There's another Herald. Go again, pitching yellow. That's the Arclight Sentinel that's been pitched. And another very key piece. It's an expensive piece, but again, I think Travis might be feeling here that he's got to get something going here. He needs to start pushing some damage, and there's the card we were talking about.
Yeah, and I think it comes at a tremendous time because as you saw, that first attack, Dilks very happy to just soak it up. That tells me that he's trying to pop back with a big turn. With a card in Arsenal, I mean, that could be the Mordred tie that allows him to just seriously push 30 damage in a turn. That's not out of the question for these Viserai decks. So now this timing for Command and Conquer seems absolutely perfect for Travis and a way for him to get back into the front foot in this game.
This card was essentially the poster child of what this game, in terms of power level. It came in for 6. It blocked for 3. It turned off defense reactions, and it threatened the arsenal. It was such a powerful move to make, and that was one of the cards that everybody was anticipating, in terms of when you're playing the games at a competitive level. How many Command and Conquers have been played? When are they coming? But like you mentioned, this is a big deal here. So we're going to block with a meet and greet, another piece of armor, and there's the Skeleton. So that is a clean 6 block. So obviously valuing that arsenal. We'll see if you're right there. That could be the Mordred Tide. You may have read the runes there really clearly.
Nice reference. Love it. No, I mean, I think Dilks was obviously showing a huge emphasis on just protecting this turn that he set up. He said, how could I still progress with a decent turn, giving up as little value as possible, and went ahead and cashed in 2 pieces of equipment, and look what card is coming down from Matthew Dilks.
An instant response here with the Arclight Sentinel, which essentially is kind of like just a hey, come at me, bro type of card. That is the Guardian that sits on the board that attracts the next attack, and with the Spectra effect, basically shuts down the combat chain.
It does, but Dilks is going to be able to play through this fairly effectively, become the Arc Knight. Pitched, you're going to go ahead and use that Rosetta Thorn, and we still were able to put some Rune Chance onto the field. It wasn't the explosive turn Dilks maybe thought he was lining up, but still, there was a huge investment from Travis, very little chance of a massive return attack, and then 3 Rune Chance and an Arsenal going into the next turn for Dilks. So I think faded that Arclight Sentinel very well. But again, I think Travis's hand lined up exactly at the right moment for when he was going to face an absolute onslaught from Dilks.
Travis now at 24 to Matthew Dilks is 22. The work has been done on both sides, and even though Travis has done the work in terms of actually cutting Matthew Dilks' life total to a more digestible number here, something that makes it look like you've actually put work into this game. Still, the fact that he's got no auras on board should be a point of concern here, and we've seen what he's pitched. He's pitched a Genesis, he's pitched I believe he's pitched an Otarath or a Parable of Humility early, so he's cycling those cards. He's opting rather to not swallow the damage early to establish a board, but keep the game in range.
Flake, this is a big turn, though. We saw Dilks lead with Mordred Tide, going into Rattlebones, going to go ahead and attack with Swarming Gloomveil. There's Rune Chance all over the place from this series of plays, as well as Go Again, as well as a card in hand, as well as a card in Arsenal, as well as a resource floating. Dilks is looking to make his move right now, not facing any auras on the opposing side. The coast is clear to really go ahead and push a lot of damage here.
Yeah, Matthew Dilks put in the work with this list, and even though, like you mentioned, he didn't necessarily come out with the top dog result at all these ProQuests, he top 8'd almost all of them, if not all of them, and he has immense acuity with this list. As that here comes the damage, like you mentioned, it's starting to trickle through. We're going to go ahead and do a little blocking with the footsteps, and hopefully that is one of those on hits that matter. In terms of the amount of auras that you're creating when the Swarming Gloomveil is supercharged and hits, that all that arcane gets a free ride.
Yeah, and I think that's why we're seeing an effort to block out here. But another amazing follow-up from Dilks. It's going to be Revel and Runeblood, another new card from Everfest. And look at those Rune Chance hit for Dilks. We're looking at 9 of them, and those are going to go ahead and be popped by the Rosetta Thorn. 9 arcane damage coming in on top, plus the 2 physical damage from Rosetta Thorn, plus 2 additional arcane damage because we have played a non-attack action this turn. Like I said, a massive turn for Dilks. Still a card in hand, by the way. I mean, I think it's arsenaling, but still didn't even give up next turn's resources to produce this much output.
It's massive how, this is just, like we mentioned, in these situations, usually, depending on what the health total is, at the same time, Travis needs to evaluate his own hand and see if this is digestible or not. What can I commit here? Oftentimes, I mean, if you're in such a lead, I just say, all right, just give me the bill. There's so many different forms of damage coming through in different sources. But that 9 points of Rune Chant is, like you mentioned, this all started with a Mordred, and those are those clutch key pieces. In the same way that Matthew Dilks was evaluating and keeping track of, the Heralds of Eruditions, the Command and Conquers that he now knows is in the list. Travis has to be aware that, all right, I've seen one Mordred, I've seen another Mordred, haven't seen a Sonata, I've seen 2 Swarming Gloomveils, but look at the power level of how these turns can go when you start with something as simple as just a Mordred Tide.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about resources Dilks has available. Spellbound Creepers, still untouched. I mean, that can, again, another card that just makes huge, huge turns out of nowhere. Skeletta, possibly still to have influence on this game as far as reducing the cost of a big turn. So, and like you mentioned too, all those Sonata Arcanics, all available in the deck. That's how you get some of your best output. So I am concerned about Travis's position. I'm not calling this one over, not anything close to it, but I think Dilks has done an awesome job navigating the early game, controlling auras, and now is coming with the damage as well.
Yeah, well, Travis is in a situation right now where he's in the cockpit, and he's still got altitude, but he's looking out both windows, and all the engines are on fire because there's no auras to keep him afloat here, unfortunately. But this is one of those big power plays that Matt Dilks is going to make, and a lot of the arcane damage now here has been absorbed by those gloves. He decided here it's best to just pitch and absorb the damage, given the fact that there's an Otarath. That doesn't have a defense value to it, so you have to pitch and absorb in that case. And like you mentioned, Matthew Dilks is getting away with this turn, punching through an amazing amount of damage, buying the entire hand out of Travis's grip, and being able to deposit a card in Arsenal. That is an excellent turn.
Exactly right. And, Travis had an okay follow-up given that scenario, Haze Bending coming down. That's an important card for the Prism deck, and about as much as you could hope for. But here's another starter for Dilks. Tome, obviously very subtle in its impact, just 0 cost, draw a card. But you've now played your non-attack action, and that can lead to all kinds of trouble if you're playing against Viscerai.
Yeah, those Rune Bloods and when you the Rune Blades, when you're just dropping in and playing against them, and as soon as they come in, so here's the Sonata Arcanix. We were talking about this earlier. We're going to see if he's just deciding to just going to go the old-fashioned way off the top.
Jam for 0.
Found it. That's a nice card to pick up. There's the 3rd Swarming Gloomveil. So 1 arcane damage will be sent Travis's way. We're going to see how he deals with it. And otherwise, then that is a great card to get. Now, I'm not a big Viscerai player. I've played against enough Viscerais. Typically, you're looking for cards that can generate Go Again on those big Sonata turns.
Absolutely, and found one in Swarming Gloomveil, or you're happy producing what I like to call faux Go Again via your Spellbound Creepers, pitching your non-attack action and instilling it, at instant speed. Another trick these Viscerai players will use, but Dilks hasn't had to get to that yet, just finding really what he needs. I mean, this Swarming Gloomveil, kind of the perfect attack for this scenario.
And what's fascinating here as well is typically, it's more prominent and obvious when you're playing against the OTK version or that strategy that Viscerai takes. When you see the Skeleton go for the block, typically you can kind of follow that up with, okay, they're going to start cracking it. That's where you want to go. So the fact that there's already a counter on it, Dilks got the value he wanted out of that card. So Travis needs to be aware of the fact that should those Rune Chants start to pile up, that just makes that Skeleton so much more valuable, and I think that Matt right now is in such a comfortable position based on the board state and the life totals that he might try to see how patient he can be with popping that card.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a Rune Blood incantation here from Dilks. Just going to go ahead and deploy that, get another Rune Chant, both on this turn and future turns, and then the Swarming Gloomveil going to go ahead and come down from Dilks. Now I believe 3 Rune Chants has been made, and it is supercharged, baby. As good as it gets for Swarming Gloomveil.
Yes, the fully operational battle station, as it were, is ready to go here. It is 4 Go Again on hit. That arcane damage is just basically express post straight to your face, unfortunately. But he's got an opportunity to block here. Looking at the hand that he's holding, I think that's the 3rd Erudition I peeked, if I'm not mistaken. That's still in there. I could be wrong. But I see a Herald. I see a Parable of Humility that he's shuffling around. So Parable of Humility, that's not defense. That's not going to block anything. So that might be pitched to absorb some arcane damage if necessary.
This is the problem for Travis. Like, these cards are critical to getting set up and actually doing Prism stuff, I would say. But unfortunately, being put on the back foot and having to use them all for defense or to pitch to fuel your Null Rune gloves, it just means that there's not enough resources left for Travis to go ahead and do his thing as the Prism player.
All right, so that's a Herald of Judgment being tossed in order to block some of the physical coming through from the Swarming Gloomveil. Herald of Judgment is it's graveyard hate to a degree, or technically Banished Zone hate, if you want to be specific here. And it's a nice little tech card. Again, one of those sideboard heroes that you can slam into a deck that really messes with... it can mess with Katsu, it can mess with Kano, it can mess with Chain. In this case right now, what is it messing with? Well, it's messing with a Swarming Gloomveil. And it's messing with a Matthew Dilks that is smelling blood in the water on this Prism matchup.
Yeah, 2 resources still floating for Dilks, so plenty of options available. Looks like we're reaching for the Arsenal now. Oh, and this is another great ad from Everfest. This is Shrill of Skullform. And this is going to get the benefit from having produced an aura this turn. Going to come in for what looks like 5+1 on the Rune Chant.
Yeah, it's almost like cheating when you're playing Viscerai and you're playing Shrill of Skullform, because if you can just open it up, again, that first domino to fall being the non-attack action, and then you come in with the Shrill of Skullform, you're always going to get the +3 because of Viscerai's text, meaning that you're creating the Rune Chant. The Rune Chant is an aura, so the Shrill of Skullform doesn't really take too much effort in order to give it its bonus.
Looks like we're going to draw a block from the Arcanite Skullcap here. Valuable resource to be used.
Still eating some damage here. He is now at 5. And again, typically the Prism player does not mind going this low if there is a board state of 3 or 4 auras.
That's the key, Flake, is that I've played at very low single digits many times as Prism and been completely sure I was in the dominant position. This is not one of those times.
This is not one of those times at all.
I mean, Dilks even has the edge in like aura setup right now when it comes to the Rune Chant producer over on his side of the battlefield. So things not going all that well for Travis, but good turn here. Getting a little of that setup going. We have the Haze Bending online. We have our own now. So let's see what Dilks has for a follow-up. It's just hard. He's basically playing a 6-card hand when you go ahead and look at the aura on the battlefield, the card in Arsenal, and 4 cards in hand. Dilks is ready to go. Yeah,
well, Matthew Dilks, or any Viscerai player when playing against an Aura Prism list, eventually has to make a decision. Is it worth it to start cleaning up auras if necessary, or am I continuing to pressure face? And I think at this point, Matthew Dilks is like, no. That's cool and all, but I've got one target in mind, and it is a direct straight shot right to the mouth in terms of all of this damage that I'm going to be airmailing your way. Here's another start with a non-attack action, and I mean, I cannot see a situation here where Matthew Dilks will be wasting a 2/2 Rosetta on an on an existing aura.
I agree with you, given the state of this game. I mean, that's just basically 1 guaranteed damage almost every time you come in, with only the 1 source of Arcane Barrier over on Travis's side. You know, you occasionally see a second source from the Prism list. Don't see one here. So I think we're in a good position as Dilks to just go ahead and routinely push that damage through.
And keep in mind, the Skeleton is still online, so that's a nice discount for 2 types of cards if necessary,
yep.
Based on the amount of Rune Chants that you have. So that is another just sort of power play that Matt can make in order to continue to just push the damage. So as it stands right now, we're just going to kind of, it's just business as usual. Matthew Dilks has a plan. He's essentially executed it flawlessly to a degree. And Travis, I don't know if it's just perhaps he hasn't found the auras that he wanted. Perhaps he just hasn't necessarily found that taking the damage has been in a comfortable state. But Matthew Dilks has pounced on this opportunity to bring Travis to a life total where now auras are essentially just art on the wall.
It's interesting because from Travis's side, it's hard to pinpoint exactly where things started to go wrong. I don't know that there was a flubbed turn where like just nothing of value was produced. It was just more, there was never an optimal turn.
Yeah.
There was never any way for him to push the game forward. Always on the back foot from the beginning. And we'll have to see if in this dire moment can find a way out of a very, very tight situation.
No, you're right there, because I mean, I've played a lot of Prism. I've played a lot of Prism with Dalen, and Dalen Mack is one of the best Prism players in the world, in my opinion. And he has always said, sometimes you just got to eat it and come back. And I've seeing a player like Travis, or seeing a Prism player rather, pitch a Genesis early is it's a very intriguing move, because that is one of the most valuable assets that you'll have in terms of generating tempo and just generating auras, and from that regard. So that could be a situation where perhaps Travis felt a little bit too threatened, needed to pitch in order to do a few things, but I felt like perhaps Genesis on the board was better in the pitch zone.
Could be. I will say I see Travis very heavily leaning on these Phantasmal Footsteps for defense, and certainly they're an amazing tool at that. Travis seems to be very willing to use resources to protect life total, though. And like you said, maybe there was a moment where you could have converted that resource into battlefield presence as opposed to where we are right now.
No, you're absolutely right. Again, Travis is no slouch at the game. He's sitting here across from one of the best Viserais out there as well. So it is a tall task. Sometimes it's just the fact that the game can kind of swing one way. It feels like it's just kind of tilted in one direction or the other. Matthew Dilks is really just going full force here. That's another Swarming Gloomveil, a very, very adept card that is getting a block from Phantasmal Footsteps and Miraging Metamorph. And that he's not done. He's not done. Matthew Dilks is holding cards. He's got his Rosetta Thorn is online, and he's just envisioning that Travis's health total at 5, and when you have one arcane barrier, Rosetta can be very tricky to navigate because you can only block one of the two. So I think Matt wants that health total as low as possible. Swing with the Rosetta because it's almost guaranteed damage.
No, I agree with you. Speaking of guaranteed damage, when you make enough rune chants, they become guaranteed damage as well. Revel and Runeblood going to put 4 more out there. So we're going to have to, again, just dump a whole hand of resources into preventing this damage. And Travis just struggling to stay alive. We're not even going to get an Arsenal on this next turn. Just completely out of options. Dilks going to go ahead Arsenal again. Continues to just advance battlefield position over and over.
And there's that one, the dangerous, dangerous number when you're only rocking one arcane barrier against Rosetta Thorn here. And, I mean, Spectral Shields are an option, blocking some damage if necessary, but they have to be timed correctly. But right now, I believe what Matthew Dilks is looking for here is non-attack, attack with go again, Rosetta. That is the formula that will eventually convert, and it's going to take all of the resources out of Travis's hand to just stay alive, whereas Matthew just needs to find that recipe and just get his way through.
I agree with you. Blood is absolutely in the water here. We'll see if Dilks looks to strike the killing blow this turn. Needs to play it a little bit more slow and carefully. I mean, become the Arc Knight, the type of versatility Dilks is going to be offered, it's going to be real hard for him not to close out this game.
And Travis is just kind of reading us, okay, so this is what's going to, perhaps end the game. Again, a very versatile card. He's just getting perhaps a little bit of clarification in terms of what the card does. But I think in this case, Matthew Dilks, I mean, you just want to make sure when the game is in this state, just no mistakes. Don't play something that you didn't mean to play. Keep everything accounted for, the amount of resources that you'll need, but ultimately it's got to be non-attack, attack with go again, Rosetta, and you should be there. But that is a big help. That is certainly a big help. And Arclight Sentinel is like a gift from the heavens in this case.
It absolutely is. Dilks, though, I mean, there's a huge amount of resources invested in producing this Arclight Sentinel. So if Dilks can find a way to skirt around it a little bit, produce a few more rune chants before he has to go ahead and attack, and then not leverage the Rosetta Thorn in that scenario, just go ahead and actually pop the rune chants, could end up in a good position. And I think that's what Dilks is debating right now.
So here's one of those fascinating rules, as you mentioned. When you attack a Spectra with Rosetta, you maintain the rune chants. But if you attack it with an attack action card, the rune chants will pop and the damage will go through.
Absolutely.
So this is certainly a situation perhaps where Matthew Dilks is thinking, if I just build up a tall enough house of cards here and I attack with an attack action, one card is not going to save you. That needs to be a color of pitch that we haven't heard of that might pitch for 4 or more. So I think right now Matthew Dilks is doing a little bit more creative accounting here. Create 4 rune chants, swing with an attack action at the Arclight Sentinel, and it's lights out.
And look at the card that Dilks got here. He pitched a non-attack action so he could go find an attack action, got Rune Flash, which tells me that that's exactly what he's trying to set up here. Just going to go ahead, spend some resources producing rune chants, and get in with that quasi-free attack.
All right, here we go. Again, we need to be able to generate rune chants. There's another rune chant, another non-attack action card.
Yep, incantation going to come down.
Get to
Second
2.
rune chant.
If Travis is holding a blue, all right, so Meet and Greet's just going to go after it. 2 of those rune chants are coming through. He was holding a yellow, so he manages to just squeak through again. If that was a red, it was lights out. The Meet and Greet here is going to go ahead and end the Arclight Sentinel's presence on the board. The 2 rune chants will be absorbed. They have to be by pitching that Soul Shield for 2, absorbing it with the Null Rune Gloves. No damage gets through. The Arclight Sentinel did its job, but again, at what expense? Nothing's left. But we do have a board here, and we do have a Spectral Shield here.
Yeah, a little something coming together for Travis. I'm still soundly in the camp that any comeback from here would be miracle-worthy. But Travis doing the best he can to try and find an out to Dilks' relentless onslaught. That rune chant just going to go ahead, tick up, tick up, tick up, take more and more resources from Travis, and eventually that Rosetta Thorn is going to meet the mark.
Yeah, it will. It's basically zeroed in here that that Rosetta Thorn. We talked about this at the top of this this round's broadcast, where that weapon in itself is such a key element in terms of the power level of why Rune Blades are so powerful. Obviously, the cards associated to the heroes, etc., are big, but that card as a fail-safe way to convert on damage is massive.
How about another Become the Arc Knight? You talk about Viscerai being a high skill cap deck. Look at how much Dilks is playing with the deck in hand, and it's so interesting to see Dilks in that position again, because in his other TCG experience, love tutoring, love being able to just go ahead and compile these bizarre, almost unthinkable answers in scenarios where no one else would. You see Dilks just looking for more and more resources to tune into this rune chant plan. You see a little nod there from Travis. I think the writing's on the wall with this Sonata Arcanix. This could be a real big play from Dilks.
And don't forget, you get the discount off the Skeleton.
Absolutely.
You know, go to the thrift store, throw your shirt on the table, and say, "All right, we're getting a discount here." That's exactly what's happening. Yeah. Sonata Arcanix with the Skeleton Chaser is going to be a lot of cards off the top and a lot of arcane damage that comes as a package deal.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And Dilks sinking even more resources into that Sonata Arcanix. You see a blue pitch there from Whispers of the Oracle. I don't know the exact X we're dealing with here, but we're going to take a look at quite a few cards for Dilks, and we're going to see if we have a diverse array. So far, just attack actions. I can't see the end of the run here. Let's see what Dilks reveals. I see Sonata Arcanix, so 1 non-attack action.
Oh, 4 and 2. Now, that's 2 arcane damage, and 1 of that damage is going to be absorbed by by the Spectral Shield. So that little engine that could save the day here.
You are correct. Had that been a 3-3 split, Dilks would have just taken the game, but that Spectral Shield coming up huge, letting Travis take another chance. But let's not forget, cards are heading to Dilks' hand. Those 2 cards are going to float right up there. I already have Viscerai making these rune chants. There you see Rune Flash. No Arclight Sentinel to blunt the impact this time. Plenty of rune chants behind, so we have to pitch a bunch. Do have the blue in hand.
Now keep in mind, this isn't a deck check, even though that Matt Dilks is putting all his cards on the table.
Yep, classic Viscerai play. Again, able to find enough blocks to keep going. But Dilks still with that rune chant on the table, still cards in hand. We know we're at least seeing a Rosetta Thorn from this point. There is the Rosetta Thorn coming in for 2 and 2.
And that's all she wrote.
And that is going to get the fist bump from Travis McDaniel. And you see Matthew Dilks with that Viscerai deck in hand, looking very, very impressive, Flake.
And looking comfortable, calm, poised. Matthew Dilks obviously been there, done that. Hasn't necessarily climbed the mountain to the top there, but he has seen of quite a view on his way to where he is right now, which is a 3-0 record at the calling here in Indianapolis. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Matt DeMarco, a.k.a. Flake. This is Brian Gottlieb, and that was one hell of a matchup. And late game in that particular matchup, you see how Matthew Dilks knows what that avenue to victory is. What's your win condition? It's going to be Rosetta Thorn and these awkward packages of physical and package deal arcane damage that is really difficult for the Prism player to deal with.
It's so funny knowing